Welcome back. This time we're talking about Timeless, Season 1, Episode 10, The Capture of Benedict Arnold. First of all, let me apologize for the tardiness of this video. When the winter finale aired, my original plan was to get this review up as quickly as possible, but I quickly got sidetracked with holidays, plus the overabundance of movies that were being released in the weeks leading up to and the weeks after Christmas. So then I changed my plans to have this video up right before the first episode of the second half of the season. I just wasn't expecting the second half of the season to start so soon. Most genre shows get a pretty big break in between. So that brings us up to date where this video is quite late, but hopefully you'll still enjoy it. Because the winter finale, this episode was a very good episode, gave us a lot of new revelations and left us with a huge cliffhanger. The episode begins with a quick look at Benedict Arnold. He's telling his wife that he has to leave. And then we jump back to the present where we get two scenes that sort of build up the personal stakes for our heroes and appear to be some major foreshadowing of some bad things to come. The first is Lucy having dinner with Agent Christopher and her wife and child. And Agent Christopher talks to Lucy about the fact that her mother doesn't even know that she's lost a daughter, Lucy's sister, who was wiped out of history after the first episode. And this has led Agent Christopher to become increasingly concerned about her own family. And she gives Lucy a flash drive with photos and documentation proving the existence of Agent Christopher's wife and their child, in case any of the changes that happened during their pursuit of Flynn result in them disappearing from Agent Christopher's life. And while that seems rather prudent when we're dealing with a fictional show, it also feels a lot like Chekhov's gun in that if we're going to have this file, that sooner or later we're going to have to use it, which means something horrible is going to happen to Agent Christopher. It's as if the character is asking the writers of the show, please destroy my life. And we get a second helping of this, although not as overt, when we get to see Rufus and Jahal spending a quiet night together until they're interrupted by a drunken Connor Mason. And he tells Rufus that Rittenhouse is on to the fact that he's been doctoring his recordings of their travels to the past, and tells him that if he does it again, Rittenhouse will react, which will mean something bad happening to his family or potentially Jahal. So after getting us all really nervous about our various characters and their relationships, we jump straight to the mission, which sends our heroes back to September 25th, 1780, which Lucy correctly deduces has to do with Benedict Arnold. So they go to his house and they're quickly captured by General Washington and his troops. But before they can be put on trial as spies, they're rescued by none other than Flynn, who has convinced Washington that he's a famed spy hunter who is going to capture Benedict Arnold for Washington, and that these three people are his allies. Of course, this is going to take some convincing on the part of Finn to get our heroes to play along, and he does this through a series of manipulations. First, with Lucy, he gives her a couple pages from the fabled journal, which are supposed to show Lucy why she allegedly joined forces with Finn in the future. As for Wyatt, he agrees to tell him who killed his wife if he tags along. And of course, this entire conversation results in Rufus once again tampering with the tape. I do appreciate the show, which has basically since the beginning been trying to tease us with the idea that Flynn is the lesser of two evils by not making him an angel, which we see when he kills Cornwallis, which could have drastic changes to history, especially in Europe. And the reason he wants to get to Benedict Arnold is because the letter that he found in the previous episodes was a letter from Benedict Arnold to his wife, and in it he mentions Rittenhouse. So when they do finally catch up with Benedict Arnold, they find out that to everyone's surprise, including Flynn, Rittenhouse is actually a person who apparently formed this organization that will eventually cause so many problems for Flynn and everyone else in the present. And this changes their mission from one of reconnaissance to one of assassination. And once again, there needs to be some convincing involved. As far as Lucy goes, I think she's less concerned about the actual act than the potential ramifications of history, since she's had personal experience with what can happen when the past is changed, and she's talks about how she's so worried about who else is going to disappear from history because of their actions if they go ahead and kill Rittenhouse. Rufus, on the other hand, doesn't seem to have as many qualms, as he's been rather consistent with the idea that changing the past to fix past horrors is a legitimate act. This is also around the time that we get some more insight into Flynn's character, because we know that he's trying to do this to save his family, who he says was killed by Rittenhouse after he started digging into one of their operations. And he has convinced himself that if he can stop Rittenhouse at its root, that his family will be alive and well in the present. But he's also convinced himself that because of all the horrible things he's done, the people he's killed, just the ways that he has manipulated the past, that he is no longer worthy of being around them. He tells Lucy that he doesn't want to bring that sort of darkness into his family's lives. And this again goes to show how well they've kind of rounded out his character. He is definitely a bad guy, but he's not an evil one. And it's understanding how he might have convinced other people to join him on this mission. And if we're to believe him, Lucy will one day be among them. So our troop eventually gets to the Rittenhouse estate, and we see that it is a very backward-thinking place as far as race and gender goes. Women are basically vessels to have babies, and anyone of color is of lesser stature and basically barely human. So very quickly we see that this Rittenhouse guy is not a very nice dude, and we're honestly not going to feel too bad if he gets whacked off, which is eventually what happens. But first, our characters are captured. Benedict Arnold is killed by Rittenhouse for bringing these spies into the organization. And eventually Rufus, who had been left behind because he wouldn't be allowed into the main house because he's black, is able to create a distraction, and they're able to free themselves. And in the ensuing chaos, Rittenhouse is killed by Flynn. But we also learn that Rittenhouse had a son who seems to have completely bought into his father's philosophies. So Flynn decides that if they're going to rid themselves of Rittenhouse, the son has to die as well. And this is where Lucy and our heroes draw the line. They're okay killing Rittenhouse, but they're not okay killing a kid. So our momentary alliance is shattered, and the kid runs away. Flynn runs after the kid, and our heroes run after Flynn. And Flynn eventually finds the kid, and at first he can't bring himself to kill him. There's still that goodness in him, but unfortunately for the kid, he is eventually able to overcome that. But before he can actually pull the trigger, Lucy shows up and distracts him long enough for the kid to get away. So as a consolation prize, Flynn kidnaps Lucy, taking her back into his time machine and escaping back to the present, leaving Rufus and Wyatt alone, and that's where the episode ends. I really thought the episode was going to play out where whatever was going to happen in the past was going to happen. They come back to the present, and we see some drastic changes. I mean, that was sort of what this whole episode was leading us up to, and that may still be what happens in the second half of the season. I have actually not watched the first episode of the second half, which has already aired, because I try not to watch the next episode before I get these videos recorded. So I have even more interest to get this video finished, edited, and online so I can watch the next episode and do the same thing with that one and hopefully get caught up with Timeless. So as I said, this episode gave us some big revelations as far as the birth of Rittenhouse, that it was actually based around an actual man. We still don't know exactly how Rittenhouse's death and the escape of his son, who witnessed his father's murder, will affect Rittenhouse in the present, as well as our various characters and present day as a whole. We also got to see some more about Flynn's character and what's driving him and where his limits are. And this is complete speculation based on nothing but just some ideas that popped in my head. Is Rittenhouse going to be the long-term villain for this show, or is Rittenhouse going to be defeated at some point? And I had to wonder, when we're seeing Flynn talking about how he wants to be a good man for his family. He's doing this for his family, but he's, bringing all of this darkness into him and doing these horrible things. Are we going to reach the point where he eventually becomes the villain that he's trying to stop once there's no more villain to stop? Like I said, that's complete speculation at this point, but it was something that I was thinking about as the episode was airing. So if you've seen this episode, and I'm assuming you have because it's been out forever at this point, what did you think about it? What did you think about the cliffhanger and where it ended? As always, you can subscribe to my channel, check out some of my other reviews, and until next time, be careful what you say to George Washington. He may think you're a spy.